This is the first of two rounds for the Festival Investment Scheme. And the deadline for applications is the 30th of May, which is always a Thursday that we have our deadlines, and it's at 5:30 Irish time. For those of you who are our international colleagues on the call. And it's for festivals that commence between the 1st of January in 2025 and the 30th of June 2025. So what I'm going to cover in the clinic are kind of four key areas. I'll go through the application guidelines with you, the application form for the scheme, how we process your applications and assess them, and then any helpful tips. So I'm not going to go into every single detail on every slide, but obviously we can share these with you afterwards for your reference. And everything that you'll see on the slides today is actually in the guidelines. So this might just help you navigate the guidelines in a more user-friendly way. But any text that you see in pink is just highlighting or bringing your attention to certain sections within the guidelines. So the Arts Council's role in festivals is to support a diverse ecology of arts-led festivals or arts programming in festivals. And this particular scheme is to support small to mid-scale festivals to deliver high-quality experiences for audiences, but also to support the engagement and development of arts and local artists and art forms. And we support a number of different models through the scheme, annual festivals, biennial festivals or triennial festival programs. And we also support festivals that might be what we call single art forms. So they operate in one art form area like film, or multidisciplinary arts where you might have a number of different art forms all in your program. It's important to know that the scheme is offered as non-recurring. So it means that we don't continually fund. So you come in each round where you are eligible and you qualify for that round, and funding is offered on a once-off basis if you're successful. And just also to be aware that you can only apply into the Festival Investment Scheme one application per year. So you'll notice when you open up the guidance that the scheme is divided into three bands, A, B, and C, and choosing the correct band for your application is very important. And there are different qualifiers for each band. So anyone can apply into band A as long as you satisfy the conditions that you're an organization applying. Individuals can't apply into the scheme. Anyone can apply into band A. Band B is for organizations, festival organizations, where they're seeking funding between 10,000 and 25,000. But we provide a guide at the beginning of the guidance just to give you an indication of what type of developmental model might be suitable for which band. So band A might be for a small festival or a new festival wanting to test new ideas. Band B is for a small to mid-scale festival that wants to develop its programming capacity. And band C is for a mid-scale festival that is strategically led. So it might have a strategic plan or have longer term considerations and ambitions. So again, just there at the bottom of the screen, an organization may make only one application under festival investment in any calendar year. There are particular caveats for each band, and I'll come to those in terms of who can apply. So if you have applied into the scheme before and you are intending to apply to a higher band than you may have applied to before, it's always advised that you try and have a conversation with the assessment team or with the festivals team at the Arts Council. And if you're a new applicant to the scheme, you don't have to meet with us beforehand. You can apply into the scheme. You should be aware that band transfers into the scheme. So if you apply into bands B or C of the scheme, you may be moved into a lower band if there is not sufficient evidence in your application to qualify it for the band under which you apply, and that the funding request is below the financial support available in that band. So, for example, if you apply for €8,000 of support in band B, then we would transfer that into band A. And we will always notify you of any change in banding as part of the application process. We don't move applications up. So if you're applying to A, we won't move it into C. We keep you in the band under which you applied if we can, because it's based on the thresholds of financial support that you're requesting. And just a note there, which says awards may be offered less than what you requested in your funding band, and that might be due to the competitive and budgetary context. So it could be that we may not have enough budget to be able to support all applications or those applications that have been recommended for funding. And so therefore we might have to make a recommendation which is a lower investment than the band under which you applied. So I might just drop in every now and again some frequently asked questions that we get. So this is about which round I should choose if I'm applying into festival investment. If I happen to be a festival that operates maybe 2 festival programs. So the frequently asked question is, if you're an organization that operates, say, a festival in April and then one in October, so you run 2 festivals in a year. The question is, should we apply into round 1 for one and round 2 for the other? So the answer to that question is no, you can only make 1 application into festival investment per year, and you would have to choose the round. So if you have 2 festivals, one in spring, one in autumn, you have to put both festival applications into round 1, which is this round. You can choose to put just the one festival in, but if you decide to do both, they have to go into round 1, but I can provide you with more detail on that if you need it. So the Festival Investment Scheme, like all other schemes at the Arts Council, has a purpose and priorities, so very specific reasons as to why we invest this funding, and this will give you some indication of how we invest those supports. So earlier, as I'd mentioned, it's to ensure a diverse and varied ecology in art form and across the country to support small festivals to develop and deliver their activity. So in order to achieve the following objectives, which align with our own policies, we look at a couple of key areas in relation to your application. So we look to see that proposals have an overarching artistic vision that resonates with the proposed activities and demonstrates artistic excellence. We also look to see if your application demonstrates what we call art form priorities. So depending on the art form areas that your program contains, depends on what the priorities might be. So I'll come on to that later, but we have art form priority areas within the scheme. So if you're a music applicant, you need to look at the music art form priorities before making an application. And then we also look at feasibility, which is around project management and financial information. And so those are how the purpose is supported. And then we look at the priorities of the scheme, which is public engagement, festival priorities, and equality, diversity, and inclusion. So what you have there is the 3 criteria areas for the scheme, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. But in terms of the award priorities, we look to see in the application evidence of audience development. So we want to find out how you are supporting, sustaining, developing your audiences, how you're providing opportunities for the public to collaborate with artists. In terms of festival priorities, we look to see whether there is an integration of your festival with local resources. So do you have local partnerships? Do you support local artists? Are you collaborating with other organizations to strengthen the development of your festival? And also, do you understand and demonstrate the context of how your festival works. So if you are working in a local, if your festival is taking place, say, in a local community, how integrated is it to that local community? Do they have opportunity to participate in your program? Do they partner with you to support your program by providing you with venues or resources, for example? Or are there artists in the region that you support as well? And the final part of the awards priorities is around equality, diversity, and inclusion. And here we ask you to demonstrate how these are attended to in what we call working practices. And what we mean by that is how is equality, diversity, and inclusion demonstrated in your program, maybe with your volunteering, on your management committees, with your recruitment process, with your providers. So it's just for us to have an understanding, not just about your program, but how you attend and prioritize and support equality, diversity, and inclusion in your proposal and in your festival work. So, who can apply to the scheme? So, in order to apply, your festival must commence between the 1st of January 25 and the 30th of June 2025. Qualifying restrictions apply. So there aren't any restrictions on Band A. On Band B, your festival organization must have been established for a minimum of 3 years and executed 3 consecutive festival programs for the festival project that you name in the application form. And then in Band C, the qualifier is to be established for a minimum of 5 years and executed 5 consecutive festival programs. So a frequently asked question that we get is what does consecutive mean? So if you can demonstrate that you have run, say, for example, if you're applying into Band B, 3 consecutive festivals, and they ran from 2016 to 2019, and you then subsequently took a break over the COVID period and then re-established your festival program, say, in 2022, you would still be able to qualify for Band B because you have demonstrated that you have run consecutive festival between 2016 and 2019. But if you have questions about that, then do come back to the team. But the reason why we have this as a caveat is just for us to be able to understand how long your organization has managed festivals and to see that there is a track record of at least 3 years for Band B applicants and at least 5 for Band C. So who cannot apply to the scheme? So individuals are, and I won't go through the entire list, but I'll highlight the areas that are probably the most important here, which is individuals cannot apply to festival investment. It's organizations only. So you must have an organization name and have a bank account at some stage set up in your organization's name. You don't need to set that bank account up before you make an application. If you're funded, that is when we'll ask you for those details. If you have applied for or are in receipt of Arts Grant Funding 2025 to undertake any festival program, you cannot apply into festival investment. So it's really important to just double check whether your organization can qualify. And if your organization is currently directly funded by the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Sports and Media for any festival program, you cannot apply into us because it's considered double funding. There are other restrictions there. So for example, if you're an arts centre and you're funded by arts centre funding through the Arts Council, then again, you can't apply into the scheme. Similarly, if you're funded by strategic funding or partnership funding, you can't apply into the scheme for 2025. Okay, so the amounts that are available and what you can apply for are outlined on this slide. So if you're applying under Band A, the maximum amount of money you can apply for, and I'll that you'll see there's an asterisk there that I'll talk about in a minute on each of the amounts. So the maximum amount of money you can apply for under Band A is 10,000. The maximum amount in Band B is up to 25,000 and C is 45,000. You can apply for anything that supports festival activities. So that could be artist fees, it could be venue rental costs. You can apply for some administrative costs. So if you have someone that's doing some producing for you, or you have some administration that needs to be covered, you can certainly put that in your application. I would say to you, think about what is a reasonable cost. Um, so the scheme is there to provide festival program activity. So we understand in festivals that you will always need some administrative cost, but you probably want to make sure you're not applying for administrative wages as your sole application request. You probably want to ensure that you have a broad ask in terms of funding, which includes festival activity such as program. You can apply for anything to support audience development, marketing and publicity, technical costs, traveller costs for artists and expenses, and also a contribution to festival program archiving, which might be working with an archivist or a web archive to be able to record your program. So this is something I just wanted to highlight. I haven't done this before, but there are now low priorities in the scheme. So we've covered the purpose and priorities. So low priorities for festival investment are proposals that are for ongoing event series, which might be a quarterly or monthly music or literature program. If these programs are ongoing throughout the year, then festival investment may not be the right scheme for you, given it's a low priority, and you may want to look at other funding available through the Arts Council, such as arts grant funding. Programs that primarily focus on the delivery of workshops or summer schools or ongoing classes are also low priority. Conventions where the primary beneficiary is not the public, and trade fairs or conference programs are also low priority. So just to touch on each of the bands, just so there is some clarity about that. So if you are deciding to apply into Band A, the maximum amount of funding you may request is the difference between your proposed expenditure and the proposed income that you indicate in your budget summary in the application form, which I'll cover with you. And the maximum amount that you can apply for in that band is 10,000 euro. There is one exception to that. So what you want to do, and this is sometimes where applicants are not clear, is that what you're asking the Arts Council for is a shortfall in your budgeting for your festival. So you are asking us the for the income shortfall. So basically your income minus your expenditure is what should result in a shortfall, which is then what you ask for the Arts Council in terms of support. So in Band A, the award limit is 10,000. In Band B, you should be asking for an award between 10,001 and 25,000, which is the band limit. And in Band C, anything between 25,001 and 45,000. So if you're applying to Band B and you apply for anything under 10,000, then we will automatically transfer that application into Band A. You'll notice on these slides that after the award limit maximum, there's an asterisk. And it says that you cannot ask for an award that's higher than those amounts, which are the limits. There is one exception to that, which is for access costs, and these are disability access costs. And where you think that you may need those costs to support artists with disabilities to engage in your program and develop work for your program, you may ask for those costs separately, and you may ask them over and above the limit. So if you're applying into band A and you needed access costs of 2,000 to facilitate your program, you can make an application into band A for €12,000, but you must be very clear and explicit in your application that 10,000 might be for program costs and 2,000 would be for access costs. And you should provide that information in your application and detail that information to on a separate document. Okay, so activity costs that you may not apply for through the scheme are any activities that are non-arts related. So what we mean by that is if you might be a food fair or a sporting event or any commercial activity, we don't support those. We don't support training programs or activities that have already taken place. You will, if you've applied into the Arts Council before, you'll recognize that we don't support activities where you may have commenced them before a decision is made on your award. In festivals, however, we do acknowledge that you have to do a certain amount of research and preparation and planning for your festival program. So what we say to you is we acknowledge that you might have to do that, but what we want to ensure is that the dates of your festival that are outlined in your application do not commence before a decision is made on your funding. So that's just very important for you to think about. Any activities that support charity fundraising or any festivals you're planning to take place out of the Republic of Ireland or any capital costs for purchasing equipment are also not available for support. So a frequently asked question we get sometimes is, we're not an arts festival. Can we apply into festival investment? So in this case, we're a food festival and we've developed a small arts program. Are we available to apply? So you can, if your main purpose is not arts, but you want to develop a strand of arts-led programming for your festival, you can apply into us. Our interest is in the development of the arts and the sustaining of the arts and the showcasing and presentation of arts. So you would need to make it very explicit as to why you wanted to develop this strand of programming and how it would support your festival to develop arts to develop arts audiences and develop local artists and art form within your area. So it's just very important that you understand that if you are not an arts-led organization primarily. So with most of the schemes to the Arts Council, we ask you to provide mandatory supporting material. And you will notice that in our guidance, when we refer to mandatory supporting material, we often use the expression you must provide this rather than you may. Whenever you see anything that says you must or you should, then that's an instruction to you rather than an option. So in this particular instance, these materials must be provided. If you don't provide mandatory supporting materials with your application online, so you have to upload them with your application, they won't be moved forward for assessment. So the first thing that happens is we check the eligibility of an application, and this is where we look for your supporting materials. So if you're applying into Band A, you only need to provide mandatory supporting material if you are proposing a new festival. And what we ask for is the CVs of those managing your festival. Because you're unable to demonstrate track record because obviously you're a new festival. So what we look for is evidence of management, festival experience, any relevant experience of running arts organizations, that might be outlined in the CVs of those proposing the new festival. So if you're applying into Band A, but you're not a new festival applicant, you don't need to provide any supporting materials unless you want to, but there's no mandatory requirement unless you're a new festival. In Band B, the mandatory requirement is to provide a maximum of 3 letters of support. And these are agreements or letters of support for your 2025 proposed festival program. So do not provide any letters of support for previous programs or dated for festivals 2024 and before. This is specifically to support your festival program, because what we're looking for in your letters of support is how your partners might help you and work with you to develop your festival program. In Band C, there are 2 different types of mandatory supports. One is a strategic festival plan or development plan, which I'll talk to you about in more detail. And the other one is to provide a minimum requirement of 5 letters of support as well. So this table is available to you in the guidance, and there is a checklist in the application form. So I always say to applicants, just absolutely double check this before you submit your application online. You can provide additional materials if you think that they would support your application, and then you can upload those online with your application. So what I'm going to cover is just a little bit more detail about what those mandatory supports might look like. So you'll see that just underneath the heading, there's a little square box that says Band A. So for the purpose of these slides, I'll cover what's relevant as mandatory support material for each of the bands. So as I mentioned there, Band A, you're only required to support to provide CVs if you're making an application for a new festival. And that's to help us gain a better understanding of how your festival will be managed. And in those CVs, you should highlight any relevant experience of managing, curating, or producing festivals or event programs. The CVs should be placed in one document. And there is a guide in the guidance. You'll see it's called Table 2. So for Bands B and Band C, letters of support are required, different amounts for different bands. So we often get questions, which is, what is a letter of support? So a letter of support is a written statement, and it's made by an individual or an organization in support of your proposed festival program. That can be in the form of a letter, or it can be a memorandum of understanding. And it's usually addressed to the festival, and it outlines what the support might be. So it could be that a local community hall is providing the venue. A school could be working with a festival on developing a program, or it could be a local artist that is being asked to be in the program and is going to develop a piece of work. So it's entirely up to you which letters of support you provide, but it helps us when we're making the assessment to understand what your partnerships might be and who is going to be involved. To be clear, you should not write a letter of support for yourself. So do not provide, the applicant should not provide a letter of support for their own festival. So the number of letters that are required is outlined in Table 1, which was on the previous slide. And just to reiterate again, we do not accept documentation that relates to previous festivals. So make sure that everything refers to your festival program for 2025. And if you can, it would be helpful to provide those in one document. One of the things to just flag, which is extremely important, is for any festival applying into Band C, one of your letters of support must be from your local authority in order to be eligible for that band. That letter of support does not have to come from the arts office within the local authority. It could come from a different department, but you should have some letter of support from the local authority which outlines how they might support or endorse your festival program and how it might be part of their own planning as well in relation to the arts in the local area. We outline in the guidance that you can provide one of two things: a letter of support, which is a letter or an email. The other thing is a memorandum of understanding, which may be new to some people on the call. So a memorandum of understanding is it's a written agreement which sets out the nature of a partnership between two or more parties. So in this case, it would be between the festival, and it could be a group of artists, or it could be a venue, or it could be a community group. Generally, these are used when you are developing projects together. So it may not be relevant to your application. So you may not want to put an MOU in, but you still have to put in letters of support. So this just the MOU provides you with options. So you may feel for your application that a letter of support provides clarity on your proposal, but for others, you may think, well, actually, we are doing more collaborative work here, and the memorandum of understanding might outline our project in a bit more detail and our festival program partnerships in a bit more detail. So we will provide those instead. But the reason why we highlight it in the slides is because there is a template on the Arts Council's website. So when you look at the available funding page and you go to festival investment, you can download this template, and it's editable, so you can change it. And you'll see there that there are two kind of pink highlights. So you should really be filling out how your partnership is relevant to you and your partner in the details of the project, and then any operating principles that you have in the MOU might be something that you want to change at some stage as well. And then finally, just for Band C applicants only, you must provide a strategic plan. It's sometimes called a business plan or festival development plan, but you need to provide that with your application. And the plan should provide a series of actions or a roadmap for your organization over a longer period of time. So sometimes people do it over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And the reason why we ask you to provide that is so we can see how your proposal for 2025 is underpinned by your strategy. So do they complement each other? If you have an existing strategic plan, you should put it in with your application form and highlight to us any potential changes to that plan over the period. If you don't have a strategic plan, there is a template available to you on the Arts Council's website. It's the Festival Development Plan template. There's a hyperlink there in the presentation. But again, it's in the same place as the MOU. So if you go into the Arts Council's website, look at available funding, you'll find a template for it under Festival Investment Scheme. So one of the things that is very important for you to know when you put your application into the Arts Council is that before anyone gets to review the content of your application, it must satisfy eligibility checks. So we have to ensure that it's eligible before it moves forward. So your application will be deemed ineligible if you miss the application deadline. So we don't accept anything after the deadline of 5:30 on the 30th of May. You must provide everything online through the online system. In order to do that, you have to make sure that you have your ARN registered, and then you're able to log in and submit all your materials through the system. We don't accept anything via email or post, so make sure everything goes through the online system. You must complete all sections of the application form. So if you feel there is a section not relevant to you, put not applicable, but don't leave it blank. If you leave your application form blank, it will be deemed ineligible. Please make sure that you check in the guidance sections 1.3 to 1.5, which is around what you may and may not apply for and who is eligible to apply. Because if you are not eligible to apply and you don't satisfy those conditions, your application could be found ineligible. Make sure that you apply for activities that satisfy the purpose of the scheme. and make sure, importantly, that you provide all the mandatory support materials that we've just covered there, which are relevant to the band under which you apply. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly touch on the application form, and I'm going to highlight areas of the application form to draw your attention to them. So these are the areas that you should consider as you're moving through the application. So you'll notice when you get to the first page that there is a general section. I would say give that a quick read. You'll notice that it outlines for you rough timings for each section of the application form. So how long it will take you to fill in each section. Make sure that you have all your information to hand and you have your guidelines with you when you're filling out the application form. You will notice that if you add all of the timings up for the sections that are highlighted there in pink, they do come to over 8 hours. So to that point, we always advise you never start your application on the day of the deadline. You are going to need more than 8 hours to fill this application form in. So we always say, you know, if you can pace yourself with it, give yourself time to review it and read over it. So the application form is divided into 7 sections. So the first one is the general information, where we ask you to give us a bit more detail on what you're applying to and in terms of bands and what art form area you're applying under. You'll notice that there's a green highlight there, which asks you to select a band. It's really important that you do this. A number of applications in the last round left this blank. It's very important for us to understand which band you are applying under. So you should select it when you are making your application online through the online system, but you also need to indicate the band that you're applying under in the application form. Section 2 is about your organization. So this is where we ask you to tell us how many festivals you've run and when your festival takes place. But we also ask for proof of a recent program. So if you're not a new festival and you have run programs before, we would ask you to indicate when they happened, and we ask you to give us the hyperlink website address of your last program. So we ask for proof of it. And we ask you to put that hyperlink in the application form. It is your responsibility as an applicant to make sure that that hyperlink is working during the assessment period. So as soon as you put your application in, right the way through to the announcement of the award is the assessment period. And so the hyperlink should be active and working. If it's not, it gets called out in the assessment. If you don't have a hyperlink to your program, so you may have published this, you may have it as a PDF, then you should put that PDF into your application. It provides us with information on what you've done before, and it helps us understand your track record, which actually is one of the areas that we look at in terms of assessing your application. The other thing is to tell us a little bit about your organization. So why is your organization set up? What does it do? What is its purpose? Who does it serve? And then to tell us in section 2.4 of the application, who's involved in the project. So this is where you would name the committee, the people that lead your project, the artists that you currently are talking to, any partnerships, for example. So it gives us a kind of a broad overview of who you are working with or intending to work with. Section 3 is about your proposal. And to highlight here that section 3 is, this section in particular, is where you would answer the criteria area around artistic quality. So we ask for you to give us the title and location of your festival. Tell us in a very short series of bullet points what your proposal is about. And then in detail in section 3, we ask you to tell us the rationale and vision for your festival. So why was the festival set up and what are you intending to do? And you proposed what we would call outcomes. Outline what your festival's artistic ambition is and how your festival supports will help artists to realize their ambitions. And then tell us how your festival fulfills the art form priorities as outlined in the guidance. So I'll come to that because that's very important that you look at that and make sure that you can demonstrate how your festival meets those priorities. Section 4 of the application form is to do with the priorities of the award. So again, this is a criteria area. And here we ask you to do two things. One is to tell us about how your proposal meets those priorities. So how does it demonstrate public engagement, festival priorities, and equality and diversity? And they're outlined for you there on the slides. They're also outlined for you in the application form. So make sure when you are answering this question in the application form that you answer each of the three areas. It's very important. So public engagement, festival priorities, and equality and diversity. And then you'll see a section called 4.2, which asks for audience targets. So this is where you might estimate who your audience, what your audience attendance numbers might be for 2025, whether that's in person or online and digital, what they were for 24, and what they were for 23. Now, just to say here that there could be an instance where you haven't run your festival in 24 by the time your application goes in. If that is the case, you should put a narrative in there to say that your festival hasn't run yet, but you should enter your 23 figures as well. And sometimes we ask for 23 figures and 25 figures if you're a biennial festival. So if you're a biennial festival that didn't do an iteration in 24, you'd put in your figures for 23 and then your estimates for 25. So section 5 is the financial management section, and this is broken down into a couple of different areas. This breakdown here as an example is the expenditure section called 5.1. And we have filled this out. This is an example for you. So you'll notice that this is broken down into areas: artistic costs, production, marketing, administration, financial, etc. What we expect you to do under details is give us as much detail as you can. And the reason why we ask you to do that is so that the assessor can understand how you've arrived at your costs. If you feel that this isn't sufficient for you in order to communicate the detail on your budgeting, then you can provide us with an additional document, but where possible, try and provide the detail in the application form. So as you go through each of the sections, you should then arrive at a total amount, which is highlighted there under total expenditure. That gives you the estimated cost of your festival project. You then do exactly the same for income. So this is where you would indicate the estimated income on your project. And you'll see there that there's a column called confirmed or pending. So you just put a C or a P into that column, and then that lets us know whether that money is already accounted for and confirmed, or whether you're estimating it because it could be box office, for example, or in this particular instance, the local authority grant is obviously pending. We are aware that local authority grants aren't confirmed by the time you put your applications in. So generally we see these as pending in application forms, but that's fine. And again, what you would do is calculate your income, and then you come to a figure at the bottom. So you've got total expenditure, and in this section, the total income. So these are some points maybe to highlight, which are extremely important, which is you will notice that there are two sections in the application finance section under income and expenditure called in-kind expenditure and in-kind income. What's very important is that these figures match. They must balance. So if you have 13,000 in this example of in-kind expenditure, you must reflect that as an income line in-kind income so that your project budget balances. If you don't put one of those in, your budget isn't going to effectively balance. And in-kind expenditure can be anything from accounting for volunteering time. So it's anything offered for free which has a cash value to it. So it could be volunteering, it could be a venue giving you some rehearsal space for free. It could be somebody providing a service to you in kind. Um, we would not expect to see artists' costs in there. Artists must be paid, but there might be other partners that you have where they might provide in-kind support, and you should list those in the expenditure and in-kind income. And as I may have mentioned before, what you want to do is make sure that once you've totaled your expenditure, you take away your estimated income, and that gives you the amount that you request in subsidy from the Arts Council. So in this case, the total expenditure is 117,665. Take away the estimated total income of 80,800, gives a request for this application going into band C of 36,865 euro. So really important that you make sure that you calculate what the subsidy required is. It's just a common error that we see in application forms. Section 6 is about festival delivery. So it's really about your organization and the project planning. So we ask you about how it's being organized and delivered, what your activity plan is. So you might include some milestone dates. And we also ask, very importantly, about how you evaluate your festival. So are you listening to your audience? Are you getting feedback from artists and other people that engage with you? And how does that evaluation then inform your future festival programs? And the last section, which is very quick, it's a checkbox, is just at the end of the application form, which just is a check for you to see that your application to a particular band has the required supporting material that is needed for it to be eligible. So in this case, it's band C. I've checked that I've got my supporting materials, and now I can upload it. Okay, how are we doing for time? Okay, so I'm going to quickly whip through this. This is processing and assessment. So you'll notice in the guidance that we outline the way that we assess your applications and the process that we follow. So after you submit your application online, you should receive 2 emails from us acknowledging your application. Your application then is checked for eligibility. In some cases, we may suggest that your application moves to a different art form team. So when you apply into festivals, you apply under an art form. So if you're a music festival, you'd apply under music. If you're a theatre festival, you'd apply under theatre. In some cases, we may look at your application form and ask you to move into a different assessment team. If we do that, we will always ask you. So this is outlined in our process. Once your application has been assessed, if it's eligible, it will move forward to assessment. If it's not eligible, we will inform you of that in writing. All applications are assessed and they're given a written assessment, which is then scored. In order to be able to be recommended for funding in the Festival Investment Scheme, your application must score 60% and over. If it scores under that, it's not considered. Once you're at those applications scoring 60% and over are then shortlisted, and then they are recommended for funding, and then funding is allocated in score order with the available budget that we have. Funding decisions are then communicated to applicants and noted by council. We expect that there will be decisions on the award in early September, and you can request feedback. So you can get the written feedback of your application. We generally send it out to you, but you can request it. So there are 3 criteria area on which we assess your application. So I've gone into some detail on that earlier, but the three areas are artistic merit, meeting the priorities of the award, and feasibility. So there are three criteria areas. Under artistic merit, we look at your proposed program, the quality of it, the context in which you are proposing that activity, whether it demonstrates excellence and high quality, and whether it meets the art form priorities. So you'll see there in the top right-hand corner, there's a table 3 highlighted for you. If you are, say, a music festival applying, you must look at this table, scroll down the table, find music and find the music priorities. Here, there's just a little example of where, if you're a circus and street arts or a spectacle applicant, you look at the art form priorities, which outline how the assessment team would prioritize applications that meet those particular art form priorities within that particular art form area. So the other two criteria areas are meeting the priorities of the award, which we covered earlier, which is festival priorities, public engagement, and equality, diversity, and inclusion. And then feasibility is the third area, which looks at the proposed timetable, the financial track record of management, the availability of supports from other partners, and then the extent to which you demonstrate appropriate and equitable conditions for artists in terms of remuneration and conditions. Each application that receives a written assessment is scored under the three criteria areas. It's the scoring guide is in the guidance. The scores run from 0 to 6, and each of the criteria areas, which are the three mentioned before, artistic quality, priorities of the award, and feasibility, are scored. And your application must score 60% in order to be recommended for funding. You should pay attention to the section in the guidance which outlines how each of the criteria is weighted. They're not all equal. In this scheme, it differs from other schemes. We put a much more significant weighting on the priorities of the award. It represents 45% of your score. So you should make sure that those three areas in the priorities of the award are answered, because it can significantly affect the determination of an award. You need to make sure that you're attending to that particular criteria. And the final thing, just before we conclude, is I wanted to draw to your attention the competitive context and nature of this scheme, because it is changing, and we think it's important to provide you with some information so that you have clarity around your expectations. So we have 2 rounds, and in the last in the last iteration of round 1, so round 1 of 2024, we received 93 applications and we were able to fund 68 of them. So it was 73%. The financial demand to the scheme was just under 2 million, and the funding offered was 1.2 million. We have provided you there with kind of average awards offered under each band. But one of the things I'm drawing your attention to is round 2, which isn't relevant to you because you're not applying into it, but the statistics here are relevant to you, in that we saw a surge of demand in the scheme in the last round, and we are expecting a similar response in this coming round of round 1. We normally get around 100 applications in round 2. We received 154. We were only able to fund 89 of them. So the percentage of applications we could support went down from 73% in round 1 to 58 in round 2. And you can see that the demand is substantially increased. So the request was just under 3 million, and we were able to give just 1.5 million in that round. So all I would say to you is, obviously be ambitious and ask us for what you need, but please be aware of the competitive context and also the Arts Council's budgetary considerations. So if you are a recurring applicant and you're asking us for more support, be really very clear and explicit about why you need that support and make a case for it and provide us with evidence as to why that support might be required. Just finally, some helpful tips. So pay attention to the language in the guidance. Must and should are instructions. So please don't think that there's flexibility on those. There isn't. If it says you must do it, you must do it. Have the guidelines to hand when you're filling out your application form. If anything appears confusing, because there's a lot of detail in it, we appreciate that. Contact myself, Tyrone, or Regina, and we'll do our very best to come back to you quickly. Pay attention to the prompts in the application form. They're there to help you. Make sure if it says you may want to consider things, then you should probably consider them. Make sure that the amount that you request on your online system is the same as the amount you request in your application form. Sometimes people get those confused, so they must be the same. Double check that you're applying for the right amount under the right band. Make sure that your request to the Arts Council is your expenditure minus your income. Please don't leave the application form blank, otherwise it would be ineligible. And try and be clear and concise, and don't assume that we know everything about your festival. You're the experts. You know your festival better than anybody else. Make sure you tell us the story and make sure that we understand it. Double check that you've included all your mandatory support material. And if you want to include anything else, you can. And also make sure that you check the art form priorities and that you've addressed those. There are frequently asked questions. They're on this slide. I'm not going to go through them because there are about 30 of them. But when we distribute the slide, you'll be able to have a look at them, and they might cover some questions which are anomalous sometimes, which the guidance might not cover. So thank you for your attention. I know that I'm going to stop sharing now. There is a lot of information in there, so I appreciate it's a lot to take in, but I'm happy to take questions.